Good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, depending on where you are joining us from Europe or from America. I'm just waiting for a critical mass to appear on our list of participants here. I think slowly people are joining. I would like to warmly welcome you today for our latest Reading CE session. My name is Zsuzsanna Vég. I am a program officer at the German Marshall Fund of the United States, and I manage our Reading CE fellowship program. And today I'm very happy to welcome our panelists for the launch of our Reading CE fellow Galina Kotliuk's policy paper, which we will be going to discuss today. Today's topic is a heavy one, but nonetheless a very important one. As you all know, Russia's unprovoked aggression on Ukraine, especially since the full-scale invasion over 3 years ago, has brought immense costs for the country. We often talk about the devastation on human lives, the loss of human lives, devastation of infrastructure, but of course the impact reaches far beyond. And today we are going to address one aspect that I believe is maybe not at the forefront of attention, but requires our attention and requires serious responses from local communities, from Ukraine, and also the international community. Today we are going to talk about the rise of gender-based violence amidst the war and how Ukraine could and should deal with this as part of its recovery process. We are very lucky to have today with us Galina, who has been extensively working on this topic during her 1-year Reading CE fellowship, and also as part of her own professional life. Beyond, she has conducted extensive field work on this issue and has a very good and detailed overview on the situation in Ukraine, but also great insight into practices internationally on how this problem can be addressed. So to start off, she will share her key findings with us from her research. But we are also very fortunate to have with us two excellent experts on the subject. Christina Kit, who heads the Ukrainian Women Lawyers Association, URFEM, and is active in Ukraine and will be able to share about her experiences in Ukrainian civil society on this topic. And also we are very honored to have with us Lara Scarpita, who is the Senior Advisor on Gender Issues at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So overall, we will cover how Ukraine can effectively tackle gender-based violence as part of its recovery. We will discuss what tools and resources administration, but also local administration, local authorities can have to effectively deal with the challenge, and how international donors may support these efforts. Today's conversation takes place as part of our Reading CE fellowship program, within which we support young analysts, researchers from across Central Europe, the countries of the Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkans, to develop their analytical skills and profile and further their career development. And through this, we, as GMF, seek to contribute to evidence-based research in these countries. We are particularly grateful to have the support of Global Affairs Canada in this program. And with that, without further ado, I would like to pass the floor now to Galina, who will share with you her main takeaways. And I will also, while she's speaking, put the link to her paper in the chat. Galina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shoshana. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. It also is my great honor today to present my key findings, and I will share with you my slides for now. Can you see my screen, right? Okay, perfect. So the topic on which I have researched for the last year is gender, like I have researched this topic under the general umbrella of gender sensitive recovery of Ukraine. And while my research, I wanted to prove that properly addressing and combating gender-based violence is an essential part of the gender sensitive recovery. And I wanted to show that local communities in Ukraine play a crucial role in combating gender-based violence. So I would like to start my presentation with the short overview of the current situation that Ukraine finds itself now in general. So, for example, currently 18% of Ukraine's territory are occupied by Russia. Almost 4 million people are internally displaced persons. That means they are relocated in Ukraine due to the full-scale invasion, and the majority of them are women. Over 6 million people fled to the countries of the EU, seeking refugee there. But according to the latest statistics, 2 million have already come back. That means there are 4 million Ukrainian refugees in the EU. And again, the overwhelming majority, up to 90%, are women and children. More than 14 million people are in need of humanitarian support right now. And according to the latest estimation, about 500 billion US dollars would be needed for Ukraine to fully recover. But this number is constantly growing. And in 6 months, it probably be even more, because the war has not ended, and that means Ukraine suffers from losses and destruction every day. So all of this has impacted greatly the situation with gender-based violence and domestic violence in Ukraine. And if we compare the same time period of 2021 to 2022 and 2023, we can see that the percentage of cases has risen to more than 83%, which is an insane increase. And we need to be aware that these are only the data provided by the National Police of Ukraine, so the registered cases, but we can only assume that the real numbers can be way higher. So what are the reasons for such a drastic rise of gender-based violence? I think I will not tell you anything new if I say that the Russian full-scale war against Ukraine is the main trigger that has instigated these changes, and it has impacted all spheres of our lives so deeply and so heavily that it has caused these raises. And for example, the full-scale invasion have caused the precarious living conditions of IDPs, and we remember there are about 4 million of them. So 4 million people are finding themselves in the situations where they do not have proper living conditions. It's not uncommon to see a family of 4 or 5 people sharing very tight space in the dormitory, which was not designed to host people. And because of the general tensions and stress and trauma and all the negative emotions, it's very easy, like one word or one move can instigate a fight or can instigate violence inside these families. Also, we are now witnessing great economic instability and unemployment. Again, people who are internally displaced have lost not only their homes, but also their jobs and thus their income. And it's quite common belief in Ukraine that man should be a provider for the family, and if he cannot meet this traditional role, of course he will show some signs of being not satisfied with his position. But that also made women quite vulnerable, because women are expected to take care of their families and children, and being unemployed, having no stable income, a woman cannot support her family, and in case violence is happening, she cannot leave the abusive partner. We also see that to some extent, the gender stereotypes are being reinforced, and gender-based violence has for a long time been seen as a so-called family matter. So it stays just in family. It should not become a public topic of discussion. So women are very reluctant to call the police, to ask for help, because they see it as the private matter. And again, the war in this way, the full-scale war in this way or another way, it reinforces these very harmful stereotypes. The challenges that we are facing as a Ukrainian society are numerous, very complex, and very multifaceted. In regards to combating and addressing gender-based violence, I would like to name the following ones. First of all, many people still do not fully realize what exactly is gender-based violence and what are its forms. For many people, it's only about physical violence, and they do not understand that emotional violence or economic violence, when a partner tries to control another partner via financial means, is also a serious offense, and they have the right to seek for help. As I already mentioned, it's about gender stereotypes, about how deeply they are rooted in the society. It's quite interesting situation, because on the one hand we see a lot of women being active, taking leadership positions, fighting for Ukraine at the front lines, being volunteers, politicians, journalists, and so on. But still, on the other hand, in regards to gender-based violence, it still exists. The stereotypes are still there, and they do not let the survivors seek for justice. Another great problem is ineffective survivor-centered approach. While doing my interviews with the experts and professionals who work in this field, I have heard from many of them that the whole system is quite ineffective. It does not put the survivor into the center. Sometimes it makes survivors go through various procedures a couple of times. Sometimes this is also about inaccessibility of some services, or it's they are very poor quality, or poor education of the professionals who are providing these services. But in the end, it impacts the most vulnerable, who are the survivors. And usually those are women and girls or children who have seen or experienced GBV. Then it's also about not systematic and often sporadic character of trainings for professionals who work with GBV. By professionals here, I mean National Police of Ukraine, social workers, sometimes teachers, because teachers are in that way or this way still quite connected to gender-based violence, because they see when children experience that in their families. It's also about medical professionals. Sometimes different trainings are done by different donors, and they do not give the systematic approach. Sometimes there is no unified format of trainings. They can have various duration. They can overlap their topics. So in the end, it just is not as effective as it should be. Another problem is the lack of systematic approach to financing the projects or the programs that work with GBV prevention and survivors support. Right now, many NGOs that operate in Ukraine are dependent on the donors who provide such support, and there is a lack of this long-term project. Sometimes donors can support this or that project within a very limited period of time, like sometimes even half a year or 1 year or 2 years, which is not enough for people to fully recover, because we are all individuals. Some people need more time to heal, some people need less, but in the end, such programs or such projects, they should be long-term, at least 5 years, in order to be effective, in order to address the needs of the population. Again, another problem is gaps in awareness raising, informational and educational campaigns. This is somehow overlaps this with my first point, when sometimes people do not really realize what is GBV, what are their forms, and what is most importantly, where they need to seek for help, where they should find their contact point, or where they should go, where are the shelters, and so on. Another big problem, lack of qualified experts. Although now I think Ukrainian civil society have built a very strong cohort of experts in different fields, like social workers, lawyers, trainers who work with the problem. But first of all, we do remember that there are 4 million Ukrainian refugees in Ukraine, and that means Ukraine has lost a lot of qualified, educated, well-prepared experts. And those who are working now in Ukraine often face burnout and they leave their positions, or again, because of the lack of systematic approach to financing, when the project ends, they find themselves in the position where they have to leave their organization and look for something else. Very often it has nothing to do with their area of expertise, which means we are losing well-prepared professionals who could perform this job and contribute, to creating all kinds of social cohesion. So what can be done, or how can we approach these challenges and try to solve them? So first of all, we need to have a very solid and systematic educational and media campaigns in order to enhance awareness, including legal awareness of citizens, of what is GBV and how to prevent it and where to seek help. I mean, we have a lot of hotlines, but who work quite effectively, but still I feel like for many people, this information somehow remains out of their attention. Then it's very important to institutionalize systematic training and education for GBV response actors. It has to be really systematic. It has to apply for every single structure, and what is more important, it has to be intersectional, because sometimes actors like police, they do not know what actors like social workers, what are their field of expertise and responsibility. So it's also important to make them kind of meet each other and interact and exchange on the topic. But it's important to have kind of unified strategy on how to train people who are at the front line of response to GBV. It's important to prevent burnout among social workers, among experts who work for NGOs, because it's very easy to burn out when dealing every day with other people's trauma, and it's very difficult to train people who can step up into these positions. And we cannot lose qualified people, so we need to think how we can keep them on their positions and ensure that they can perform their work. Another thing is to adopt strategic approach to projects. As I said, instead of financing short-term projects, we need to switch to long-term approach and to support the projects that work on GBV at least for 5 years if we want to achieve effective results. The next thing is to develop effective referral pathway systems. I think I need to explain a little bit here, because no organization or state institution can provide all of the services for a survivor in one place. So usually they redirect the survivors to other organizations or institutions. So like lawyers or like medical workers to get medical support, or to psychologists and so on. So it's very important that on the local level, where all the actors kind of know each other, there is a database with the current state of art of all the actors who are working in the field, and then to redirect the survivor effectively and not to cause them to go through procedures that are very difficult for them in this vulnerable state for multiple times. So it needs to be effective, it needs to be survivor-centered, and it needs to be up to date. Then it's very important to introduce the indicators of effective work and transparent feedback mechanisms in order for the public to be able actually to see if this organization or that shelter are meeting their requirements, and if the beneficiaries who are receiving services from them are receiving the services of high quality. Because very often up to now, the survivors themselves cannot give the feedback, cannot give the kind of the evaluation of the services. And I think it's very important to change that. And together with the indicators, it's very important to have the accountability if organization, if institution doesn't meet them. Another thing, it's very important to empower women on decision-making positions, because women know very well that can understand the survivors who also are other women better than men, and very often they can make decisions that would be beneficial to other women because they have this perspective. The next suggestion is to revise and improve survivor support system. Via my interviews with the colleagues, I've heard, for example, a request that many survivors sometimes need money to pay the rent for the first 3 months when they leave the abusive partner. And very often this is not taken in the account while developing the strategies and approaches of working with them, because that is seen sometimes as insufficient or unimportant. But it really is, in order to create sustainability in the progress of their healing. And the last one, I would say, to build trust. I have heard the word trust multiple times when talking to my vis-a-vis, and building trust, meaning building trust between the representatives of local communities administration and the NGOs that are working there, or the NGOs and their beneficiaries, or the representatives of the national police and the local NGOs. I mean, this involves all these stakeholders, but it's very important to build trustful relationships, because for women who are survivors of gender-based violence, it's very important to know that they will be supported and that they can receive help, and they will never ask for help if they do not trust this or that institution. So it's very crucial to do so. And I understand this is not a work that can be done within half a year or a year. It's a strategic move, but I think our efforts should be aimed at achieving these steps. So that was it from my side regarding the recommendations of how to tackle this problem. So yeah, please, Shoshana, I'm going back to you.
Thank you very much for this extensive overview, Alina. Before we zoom out for maybe more international perspective, I would like to pass the floor now to Christina to give her initial comments and share some of her insights from the ground. And meanwhile, I would like to encourage our audience to also please, if you have questions, comments, put those in the Q&A box. After the initial contributions from our speakers, I will be picking up your questions from there, and that is how we will integrate your input into the conversation. So Christina, the floor is now yours.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. Thank you for invitation. And first of all, I want to say thanks, Halina, for your very important research, and especially for your recommendation, what we have to do in the future, and what we can to do concrete now. And I want share our experience in responding on sexual gender-based violence issues in Ukraine and how we work with our justice system in general. It's mean with law enforcement system, legal community, and civil society organizations, especially women's rights organization. Some recommendations which was mentioned by Halina. Now we try implement, especially if we talk about implementing survivor-centered approach in gender-based violence cases and domestic violence cases. First of all, I want say that together with General Prosecutor Office and National Police, we start to work on a special standards recommendation for law enforcement system, how they can work with survivors of domestic violence, and how they have to implement international standards, especially EU directives, if we talk about a survivor-centered approach in gender-based violence cases. It's very important part of our work because we prepare some methodology recommendation and universal standards for all law enforcement specialists who investigate these cases. At the same time, I want to mention that in General Prosecutor Office and a National Police, we have the specialization for prosecutor and investigators who investigate domestic violence cases. And it's mean that all our work, which now we implement, can have very good result because this work is very focused on concrete investigators and prosecutors who work with these cases. I want to mention two very crucial role of civil society organization if you talk about implementation of Istanbul Convention, because you know we ratified Istanbul Convention in 2022, and now we have a few laws and draft law which register in parliament, and some of them is adopted by parliament. Last year we our parliament approved some amendments to our to our administrative code, and now we have the special article about sexual harassment, including sexual harassment in cyber violence against women too, and it's very important, especially now when we have special directives approved by EU in 2022, which include some recommendation which mechanism we have implement if you talk about responding to cyber violence as a part of gender-based violence against women. And it's very important part of our work too. Additional to this, we now implement a new approach if you talk about provide and analyze risk and needs of survivors of gender-based violence, especially domestic violence. If you talk about survivor-centered approach, identify needs and risks for survivors of domestic violence is a very big part work of justice system too. It means that we try change focus. If you talk about survivors of domestic violence, that this is people who have very important needs, and for prosecutor and investigators, very important identifies these needs and not only investigate a concrete case, but build coordination and cooperation with social workers, legal aid system, and other specialists who have to provide different assistance for survivors of domestic violence. It means that survivors during investigation process is not only instrument for evidence, it is people who suffered from violence and who, first of all, have a lot of needs, and we have to think about how we can help them in this situation. Of course, if you talk about our policy, implementation of Istanbul Convention and legislation, we have many results on the national level. Our next draft law, which now registered in Parliament, is about how we can create better legislation in domestic violence area and respond better on domestic violence. We prepared few amendments to our criminal code and criminal procedure code, and I hope this year these amendments will be approved by our parliament. And role of Minister of Internal Affairs in this process is crucial. It was their initiative, and our Minister of Internal Affairs, together with civil society organization, prepared these amendments to criminal code and criminal procedure code. It's show how we in Ukraine try build this cooperation between government and women's rights organization and civil society organization. If you talk about policy, implementing EU standards and changing approach in domestic violence cases. But our next steps, and Helena mentioned about this, it's one challenge which we have, how we have to implement this new policy, new standards, and new approaches on the local level, because on the national level we work together, we prepare this policy, etc. But if you talk about localization, it's our task, and together with, for example, now our organization, together with General Prosecutor Office Special Department, who work with domestic violence cases, and together with National Police, we organize many trainings, educational program for prosecutor and investigators who work on the local level, and we try all of this study program include survivor-centered approach. What is this, and how we have to implement this on the practice. And of course, always we pay attention of our prosecutor and investigators, how they can coordinate their work with civil society organization in all regions in Ukraine, because we have many women's rights organizations who work on the local level, and they have very good practice and experience, and it's very important to build this partnership between law enforcement system and civil society organization if you talk about build trust to justice system in general, and how we can be more open to survivors of domestic violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, for drawing attention to the development of the legal tools that is happening in Ukraine, the reforms, and also the positive steps taken in enforcement and implementation. I think it's really commendable that while fighting a war to defend itself, Ukraine continues to drive forward the reforms in this field. And it's great to see that there is engagement between authorities and civil society to address this matter, and maybe we can dive further into this in the conversation later. But before that, I would like to pass the floor now to Lara to ask for her perspective. You have a host of experience on the issue, a wide view on the international practices. So please share your wisdom with us. And thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone, and let me really express my gratitude to the German funds for German Marshall Funds for organizing this discussion, and also a big congratulations to Galina that we have been supporting at the OEC, and she was a partner, a member of our high-level mentoring program. Really good to see this research, and we are of course very proud to see us thrive in a professional career. Now, I think today's discussion, from my perspective, on the role of local communities in addressing gender-based violence in Ukraine, is really, really vital. And I believe it's vital because the role of local organizations, especially the grassroots women organization, is too often unrecognized and insufficiently supported, something that Galina pointed out. And this is indeed in spite of the fact that the women of Ukraine have and continue to show an extraordinary courage and an extraordinary resilience, and they've been the one who have been since the beginning at the forefront of responding to the war. They've been first responders, community leaders, peace builders. They're organizing shelters, they've been providing trauma support, psychological support, and they really work to stitch the fabric of the society to really work to bring the communities together. I think this role is vital but not sufficiently recognized. And this is something that we have been working extensively also with our Ukrainian partners to really work to empower the women of Ukraine, to give them space and to give them opportunity to highlight the needs that their country has, but also what are the gaps and how the international community needs to support them better. I take the point about Galina and some of the key challenges that she pointed out. Some are extremely important. I think the biggest challenges of living in conflicts in general, and here specifically in the context of Ukraine, when you have 83% increase in the case of domestic violence because of a number of factors that do make violence against women and girls increase, you really need to put in place very effective protection and prevention measures. And of course, the scale of the problem and the speed of the increase itself poses an additional challenge in order to be able to respond effectively. There is also indeed a gap in understanding why domestic violence is increasing and what factors are increasing it, and what needs to be done to address it. But I mean, overall, and I think this was clear also from Galina's presentation and also from Christina, the social impact of the conflict is huge. And this needs to be our starting point when we are talking about how can we support Ukraine in recovery and reconstructions, and how can we effectively support the local communities and women-led organizations in their work to address gender-based violence. Our work has focused, as OEC, focused very much on supporting Ukraine, and we are doing it and continue doing it in putting in place measures for effectively responding and preventing gender-based violence, making sure that this is not just an afterthought in the recovery process, but making sure that this is very much part of the current response, the humanitarian response, but also part of the national planning and part of the international cooperation efforts. We have launched several initiatives. Both Galina and Christina are very well aware. They've been part of it. One of them has been the exchanges that we have established between the women of Ukraine and the women of Bosnia-Herzegovina in order to learn about the key challenges and opportunities for civil society to deal with conflict-related sexual violence and domestic violence in conflict. We are working very closely also with the Commissioner on Gender Equality, with the office, but also with the grassroots organization, to also incorporate, and the international partners to incorporate gender responsive recovery and reconstructions that also takes into account the key issue of gender-based violence. And we've been supporting our Ukrainian partners to advocate in view of big international conferences. And another aspect which is also particularly important for us, and it was mentioned by Christina, it's also the Istanbul Convention. We are actively encouraging Ukraine to align with the Istanbul Convention because this treaty is not just a legal tool, it is a roadmap. It really offers a comprehensive guidance on how to design robust gender-based violence prevention system and to protect the survivors. And we hope that this can serve as a guiding framework as Ukraine shapes its current and post-war vision. But just to conclude, I just want to say that this kind of research, this kind of studies are very important for us for policy making. I encourage widespread dissemination because this topic is especially gender-based violence and the role of local communities. It's something is a topic that is very seldom addressed effectively, despite the fact that what's happening today in terms of domestic violence and gender-based violence in general will have long-term impact on the whole society of Ukraine. So from our side, we will continue to engage and see how effectively we can use our mechanism to support civil society in Ukraine and the work that they're doing. But I encourage you also to distribute this widely among the international community so they can guide also policy response. Over to you, and thanks for the possibility to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Laura, for your contribution and also for the OSCE's contribution and for highlighting that it's really important work that you all do. Before I open the floor for questions from the audience, I would like to pass the floor back to Halina for some quick reactions. You have taken a very comprehensive approach to address the various challenges, but you yourself also highlighted the role of local authorities and a community-based approach in addressing gender-based violence, and both Christina and Lara touched on that. So maybe if you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on how you have seen in your research the role of Romadas in dealing with the problem and the local level cooperation, I think your insights would be really, really great on that too.
Yes, thank you, Stefana. As already the colleagues have mentioned, a lot of work is being done to help Ukraine tackle the problem of GBV.
We don't hear, we hear you very not good. Yes, maybe again you try.
What about now?
Now they're fine. Yes, thank you.
Okay. What a relief. Yes, so as I was saying, both colleagues Lara and Christina have mentioned that a lot of work is being done to help Ukraine combat gender-based violence, both of international and national level, including like consulting, research. What is very important, the work with Ukrainian legislation. This is what Christina has talked about. But I think no matter how good our legislation is, and it is not the worst. I see a lot of progress. I see a lot of amendments being done also due to the work Christine and her colleagues are doing. And with the implementation of ratification of the Istanbul Convention, it's much easier to push for these changes and to and cooperate with government in order to achieve them. But it doesn't matter how good national legislation is, if people on the local level do not know how to work with it and how to help the survivors, because localization, as Christina said, again, is task of local governments, of local experts, and of local law enforcement forces. And Hromadas already now are at the forefront of the response to the full-scale invasion. They were the first to organize a humanitarian response to people living there. They were the first to organize the efforts to help other Hromadas or to help the Ukrainian army. So the things that they can do are just amazing, because no one knows better what people living in the Hromada need than the representatives of this Hromada. And I have also conducted a lot of interviews with the representatives of local governments of Hromadas, and what I have noticed is that if there is a political will and right people and right places who can drive these changes, a lot can be achieved. Hromada can have mobile units, they can have perfectly functioning referral systems. They can have regular education campaigns at schools. They can have trainings for social workers, international exchanges, and so on. So we have a lot of great examples from many Ukrainian Hromadas that is possible. It's not something that we as researchers or policy makers are trying them to convince to do. My research based on real life examples. So I'm a believer that everything is possible to achieve, but we need, of course, I heard sometimes the answers that local Hromadas just do not understand why they need to combat gender-based violence, because there is none in their community, which is not true, basically, because this is the problem that affects everyone in our society, in other societies. So yes, I think that all the changes and Ukraine's recovery will be happening on the local level. This is very important to remember. People who are living in Hromadas will rebuild this country. So, and it's our task to create such conditions, such environment that they will know how to address this problem and how to help the survivors. Because if we want to achieve sustainable peace, it will not be possible to achieve without combating GBV. Lara has mentioned the example of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I also did research and interviews with the experts there. And my vis-a-vis were repeatedly telling me is that we need to approach and address this problem now. Now it's the time, because after war it will be too late, and they are still struggling 30 years after the Balkan War. They're still struggling, trying to mitigate the consequences of this horrible war. So if we want to have sustainable recovery, if we want to have sustainable peace and social cohesion, we need to start acting now, and we need to do that both on national and local level, and never underestimate what people at the local level can actually do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Halina. I would again encourage our audience to share comments and questions in the Q&A. But I will also start now picking up some of the questions we have already received. And since Halina, you ended on the role of recovery happening on the local level, but also highlighted the context of the war and the importance of acting now, I would like to ask all of you, or whoever would like to jump in on this, to address the question, what is really what the war brought on in addition to the general problem of gender-based violence. here and there you touched on also conflict-related sexual violence. And this is obviously a very serious and additional burden both on the victims and on society. That is kind of an exceptional situation. It's not part of the normal, if it's in any way can be called normal, way of this problem being present in society. So how is Ukraine, the authorities, the society, civil society dealing with this? How do you see it being addressed? And related to this question, what can we do and what must we do now immediately, considering that obviously resources are limited? And then what can be built towards in the longer term to really achieve that sustainable peace that Hanina was talking about? Anybody?
Yeah.
Feel free to, yes.
If I can, I will start with this. Of course, conflict-related sexual violence, which committed by Russian soldiers against Ukrainian civilians, and not only civilians and military personnel, show us how it's very important have very effective mechanism responding on gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence. If you talk about conflict-related sexual violence in 2022, UN Special Secretary Pramila Patten signed with our government legal framework, according to which work in our state authorities and civil society organization. In 2022, we prepared some implementation plan, which include our views, I mean Ukrainian views of civil society organization and our state authorities, how we have to respond on conflict-related sexual violence. And now we are working if I talk we, it's mean our state authorities and civil society organization, including international organization, because many our partner, it's international organization too. We are working on implementing of this implementation plan in 5 areas. First of all, it's sexual exploitation as a part of conflict-related sexual violence. It means that we now make better our mechanism respond on sexual trafficking and sexual exploitation connect with war crimes. Second, our area in which we are working, it's services for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, male and female survivors of CRSV, including children, because all of these people have different needs and we need different, sometimes different services and approaches if we talk about, for example, male and female survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. And it's, for example, now in Ukraine, we only start build our social system which will include services for male survivors of CRSV, and it's very important to remember too. Third part of our work is, of course, justice and accountability, and in this area, very big role play our justice system and law enforcement system. And if you talk about survivor-centered approach, first of all, this approach was implemented in CRSV cases. Only after that, we start talk about gender-based violence cases in general, because in 2022, we started work with new strategy, which was adopted by General Prosecutor Office in CRSV cases, and we start work in other way, because we worry that people will not report it about CRSV because they did not trust to justice system in general. Fourth area, it's security and defense sector. We understand that very important work with our Minister of Defense and with our military personnel. If you talk about identification, conflict-related sexual violence, we train them and study them, what is this international humanitarian law, how they have worked with civilian personnel on the occupied territory, etc. And fifth area, of course, it's reparation and compensation for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. We don't have time wait when war ended and only after that talk about reparation. We have to talk about reparation for survivors of CRSV now. And the result of our work, it's new law about urgent interim reparation for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, which was adopted last year in November. And what it means if you talk about our next steps, and not only our but all international community, we have to think where we can find funds for survivors of CRSV who need this reparation and compensation now, how we can unite all these funds, how we can work with the register of damages for Ukraine, and how we have to implement this reparation mechanism in Ukraine, because reparation mechanism, it's not only about some compensation for survivors of CRSV. Of course, it's about justice, it's about memorialization, it's about rehabilitation for survivors of CRSV, and this task which we have to do now immediately and guarantee survivors based social services and justice, not only on the national level, but on the international level too.
Thank you very much. Lara, please.
Yeah, just a brief comment on my side. What you mentioned, Susanna, the increase in domestic violence is not the norm, but unfortunately, what we are seeing in conflicts in general around the world is that at some point in time it becomes the norm, and it's very common the path and the trajectory of this increase that we are seeing in Ukraine. We have seen them in many other conflicts, and this is why we are also working in our part of our support with the women of Ukraine. We are bringing them and providing them with expertise from other conflicts in order to learn how to deal with it from similar experiences. But these one of the key best practices, I think, it's again, going back to the key role of the local community, I agree with Galina what she mentioned, that recovery will occurs and we recover first and foremost at the local level. So invest very much in the local grassroots organization and in the local structures, because those are the one obviously working together with the national authorities, because those are the ones that are able to provide the immediate support to the survivors. I mean, from our side, part of our work has been, directly working with the local communities and local CSOs to provide them with assistance with the basic psychological infrastructures to put in place basic psychological and physical and also legal and institutional support. Of course, much more needs to be done. These are huge challenges, but working at the local level, it's very important. And the second point that I wanted to raise is that it's fundamental to make sure that violence against women and girls become an integral part of the reconstruction and recovery discussions. Why? Because these are rebuilding the society. It's as fundamental as rebuilding the infrastructure. As a matter of fact, it's actually more important than rebuilding purely the infrastructures. We've been working and supporting the Ukrainian Ukrainian women to participate to work together with recommendations for the Recovery and Reconstruction Conference in Berlin last year. We supported their participation because it's also important that women have access to these decision-making tables, and we will do the same for the upcoming one. But the approach needs to be really, really multi-layered, bearing in mind that multiple forms of violence occur during conflict, and all of them have very serious impact on the well-being of the survivors, of the families, of the communities. So holistic approaches, and this is a point that Galina makes very clear in her research, holistic approaches are needed. Thank you.
I would like to add and to follow up on what Lara has said about holistic approach. And I would like to mention a point which some people actually do not see connections to, but I think it's very important, because I think that addressing and preventing GBV is actually very, very closely related to the veterans reintegration program, because after the war will end, like the hot phase, the combat actions, we will have all these people, both men and women, coming back from their service to their civilian life. And a great percentage of them will be deeply traumatized by what they've been through during all these years of this very, very violent war. Some of them will have PTSD, and that will have the direct impact on their families. And this is what women rights organizations are already reporting, that they see the increase of domestic and gender-based violence in the families of soldiers who come on the vacation, and they have only 10 days to be with their families, so they do not even have enough time kind of to switch from this like war mode to the normal family mode of existence. So I think we need to address that as well if we want to have a society that lives in the concept of positive peace. So, and positive peace means not only bombs not falling on you, but also peace at home, and the right to enjoy your life without violence at home, and having this social cohesion in your local communities. We need to react now. So for me, these two issues are very, very closely connected. And this is, Shoshana, answering your question, what the war has brought in the addition to the problem. So this is what it has brought. It has ruined so many lives, it has traumatized so many people, and that will take decades to tackle this and to fully recover. And we see that from the examples of Georgia, which was again blatantly invaded by Russia. We see that on the example of Bosnia and Herzegovina. They're still recovering. It's a work in progress, and this is something that we as Ukrainian society has to be prepared for.
Thank you very much. I would just bring one of the questions related to this very topic here, just so we also explicitly try to answer this as well. And I think it also links back to some of the issues that you have been raising, Halina, about awareness raising, about the trust in the institutions, in the communities. So can people really ask for help when they need? So one of our participants is asking if there have been research on whether the increase in domestic violence cases was higher in the occupied and then liberated parts of Ukraine, and if there can be a direct linkage shown, especially with conflict-related sexual violence cases. So we talked a lot about this already, but here what I am also trying to get to is just how much of the scale of the problem we are already aware of, how much latency there may still be, and whether or not we can have reliable data already at this point.
I can maybe start, but I think Christina can, of course, add on this. The problem is what in regards to GBV and domestic violence, the problem is we have no data from the occupied territories. And that is a huge problem because we have no access neither to any numbers nor to the survivors. And you have to understand that this is a very deliberate politics of Russia that has decriminalized gender-based violence and domestic violence in their country. And for them, it's not a crime, and female lives are apparently worth less than male lives. So, and this is what is happening now on the currently occupied territories of Ukraine. We do have more information about the survivors of CRSV, but here I think Christina is an expert and can talk more on that.
Yeah, thank you, Helena. I will add a few words. Of course, as Helena mentioned, we don't have any information now domestic violence cases committed on occupied territory because we don't have access to this territory and to people who lives there. If you talk about the occupied territory or territory which are near to the front line, of course, we have official statistic in National Police and General Prosecutor Office because all cases registered. But I'm not now ready say how many percent of domestic violence cases we have on the occupied territory and how many in other region of Ukraine, but you can check this information officially on website of our law enforcement system. But I want say too that if you talk about the occupied territory, we have other challenges on this territory. Every year we organize during 16 days against violence of women conference together with our Minister of Internal Affairs and General Prosecutor Office. And every year our law enforcement system from the occupied territory or near frontline territory mentioned about some challenges connected with infrastructure for survivors of domestic violence, because territory which was occupied, of course, many institutions was destroyed by Russian soldiers. Territory which are near front line, it means that people who live on this territory, they are not feel in safety, and sometimes we don't have any sometimes we have services, but people cannot use the services because it's very dangerous for them, because every time can be missiles attack or etc. It means that our general rules and mechanism which we have and which connect with responding on domestic violence cases can work in some region on Ukraine, but cannot work in other region of Ukraine, especially if you talk about regions which are very closely to front line. It's mean and today we talk a lot about localization of our policy, and it's very important, especially if you talk about territory, the occupied territory and territory which are near front line. We have to create different mechanisms how we can help people who live on this territory and provide these services more in safety way for them. Yes, because it's sometimes it's impossible. And of course, not many we don't have many specialists who want to work on this territory. Yes, because it's very dangerous for your life, and it's very big question how we can guarantee services for people if it can be some dangerous for law enforcement system, medical personnel, psychologist experts, etc. Many services we can provide online. If you talk about psychological support, for example, we have different online platforms where people can get this support. But if you talk about communication with law enforcement system, if you talk about medical support for survivors of domestic violence, sometimes it's impossible on the territory we are near to front line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would pick up two very specific legal questions that we have also received from one of our participants in the audience. And they go as, for one, is there legislation in place that grants crime victims the right to express their views during criminal proceedings against perpetrators? Is that part of the how the system operates in Ukraine at the moment? And two, as part of a broader legal effort to combat gender-based violence, is it recommended to pursue civil lawsuits against perpetrators in addition to criminal proceedings? Christina, I think these might be closest to your areas of expertise.
Yes, thank you. Very short about this. Of course, to our legislation, survivors of gender-based violence have right to share their testimony about crimes, and they have right to describe perpetrators. And this testimonies are very useful and very important for our law enforcement system. Survivors can share their testimony during investigation process and in the court. But now we talk about how we can minimize how many times survivors share their testimony for justice system in general, because if you talk about trauma-oriented approach, for us it's very important think how we can limit this time, how many survivors communicate with prosecutor or investigators or in the court. For example, if you talk about conflict-related sexual violence, we have very good practice now when during investigation process, all interviews which organized by prosecutor or investigators can be recorded. We organize video record, and it means that this video evidence we can use during trial process, and it means that survivors have rights do not go to the court and again share this their own history about this violence. And if you talk about lawsuits, civil lawsuits, of course, we recommend survivors of gender-based violence or conflict-related sexual violence prepare these civil lawsuits. According to our legislation, we can do this during criminal process or after verdicts. For example, we have both options for survivors of gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence. But more important question is how we will implement this verdict and decision of court about connect with civil lawsuits in the future. Because if you talk about ordinary crimes, of course, we have perpetrators who committed this crime, and we can implement this verdicts in Ukraine. But if you talk about war crime cases, especially conflict-related sexual violence cases, most cases now in the court, and we work with them in absentia. It means that we don't have physical perpetrators in Ukraine, and even we will have verdicts or court decisions that, for example, Russian soldiers have to pay some sum of some compensation for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. Very big question to legal community in general, not only to Ukrainian legal community, but to international legal community, how we will guarantee that this verdict will be implemented in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. I would then now move on to a more maybe international angle. We already touched a little bit on how the OSCE seeks to support Ukraine. Halina, you also mentioned that you yourself have been exchanging with experts from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and there is clearly an exchange of experiences going on. One of our participants is asking, in addition to this, which European countries are actively supporting Ukraine in addressing gender-based violence amid the conflict, and I would say also in general, if you have knowledge of that, and what type of assistance do we typically see? Is it financial aid, infrastructure development, capacity building, support with legal reforms? So how would you assess the contributions of the European international community to addressing the challenges? And adding on to that, over the past years, there have been a lot of talk about feminist diplomacy, feminist foreign policy. So do we see that countries which embrace this approach to foreign affairs, like France, Germany, do step up and engage more in supporting, in this case, Ukraine on relevant topics? I would direct this question both to Halina and Lara.
Just
Lara, if you
briefly
want to
on,
start.
yes, no, I mean, briefly on my side, I can comment on the OEC. Galina can probably have more details about all the detailed support. But I mean, from our side, from the OEC perspective, Ukraine is very much on top of our agenda, and we've been working extensively. My office, in particular, we've been working with the civil society organization, women-led organizations, but of course, we also have an extensive support program inside Ukraine, assisting the authorities and working very closely with the local communities to address the consequences of the war, and also look at the gender aspect of the impact. We've been working a lot, in particular, in supporting the women of Ukraine and the leadership of the women of Ukraine, including, and I'll just give you another example, working with the State Emergency Services of Ukraine, who is in the lead in providing humanitarian assistance. And we have been working with them to develop gender responsive humanitarian actions, at the same time as working with promoting women leadership and recognizing the role that women have in humanitarian response. Of course, like in any conflict, the scale of the challenges and addressing the needs of the population and addressing the immense immediate and continuous immediate suffering, but also the long-term impact and suffering of the people, it's enormous. So the needs are great, and we do what we can. But I will pass on to Alina, but to Galina. But I think the response requires, here is one area where we need to work together with a strong partnership. It's needed to make sure that the funding and the capacities available are effectively used to meet the challenges that the Ukrainian population is facing. But I will pass on to Galina and to Christina, who would have much more details about the situation in the country. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. I would try to briefly answer this question. When I'm thinking about European countries that work very specifically and are targeting the problem of GBV in Ukraine, the first that comes to my mind is Sweden, and especially the organization Kvinna till Kvinna, which supports and works very closely with different women rights organizations in conflict-affected targeted areas in order to tackle the problem. Ukraine is no exception. I know they have very strong partnerships in Ukraine, and yeah, this is something what they are actively doing. I think that probably if we are talking about European countries, if you look into the financing schemes of, let's say, the governments or separate NGOs, there will be some grants that are targeting this problem, but I cannot, unfortunately, give you the very exact names or examples. Regarding feminist diplomacy or feminist foreign policy, I'm more familiar with German context because I work for a German political foundation in Ukraine, Heinrich Böll Foundation, and let's be honest, with the new government in charge, I think this is the end of the feminist foreign policy for Germany, with the government being more conservative. But on the other hand, what we see, for example, from GFFO, German Federal Foreign Office, they are very active in supporting Ukrainian women's rights organizations. And I know a lot of colleagues who work for these organizations that have received financing from them, and this financing was actually targeting gender-based violence or supporting the survivors. So it is happening, but I would not call it under the umbrella of feminist foreign policy. It's, it's pegged differently, but this support is there. Shoshana, your mic.
Yes, thank you. My mouse decided to freeze. So thank you very much for your responses, Alina and Lara. We are slowly approaching the end of our allocated time. We had one more question that I wanted to raise, and this links, of course, to the matter of the psychological, psychosocial aspects of the impact of gender-based violence, but is also broader the way it was posed. So, of course, the conflict itself, the war in Ukraine, results in a lot of mental, emotional strain on the society. And there has been an initiative by Olena Zelenska for a mental health program called How Are You? That also received the support of the World Health Organization. How do you see not just this program playing out, rolling out, but generally this aspect of conflict-related recovery, addressing psychological, mental health issues in Ukraine, receiving attention over the past few years? Because if we are talking about societal recovery, then of course we need to think also beyond just gender-based violence. Already Kalina mentioned the issue of veteran reintegration and dealing with the consequences in that aspect, the issue of PTSD. So if you have any experience, thoughts on this process and angle, just briefly, any of you, if you want to jump in.
I can start maybe a few words about our experience. Of course, we as a lawyer who provide legal aid for survivors of sexual violence, including conflict-related sexual violence, we feel that now we cannot work if we don't if you don't have any psychological support, for example, first of all, as a specialist who work with survivors of sexual violence, and at the same time, if you don't have cooperation with a psychological expert who can provide psychological support for our survivors of conflict-related sexual violence and sexual violence in general. It means that this we try to build this closer cooperation with psychological experts, especially we cooperate with many civil society organizations who provide this psychological support. At the same time, we established in our organization mental health program for our lawyers who work with survivors of conflict-related sexual violence and sexual violence in general, because we had situation when lawyers said that we cannot continue this work because we feel that we do not have enough energy and power, and we need additional support from psychologists. It means that not only survivors who suffer from sexual violence have to work with psychology experts, but specialists too, and just specialists in justice system, not only social worker, but specialists who investigate these cases, prosecutor, investigators, and lawyers, judges have to need this support. And what it means? It means that we have to create this infrastructure for this support. Yes, because I feel that in our culture it's not very popular communicate and work with psychological experts. It means that this initiative established by, for example, Olena Zelenska, our first lady, it's very important too, because it shows that it's normal that you have to, when you work with psychology expert, and it is normal ask how are you, and if you are not good, we have different services in which you can find help for you. It's very important, and it's very big. It can be very big part for recovery process too. Thank you.
I will just briefly add, although I'm not very familiar with this specific program, but it's important to understand that Ukrainian society is deeply traumatized. It's been 11 years of war and 3 years of the full-scale war, and we are tired, we are traumatized. Every family is affected. You will not find a family in Ukraine which is not affected by the war. So, of course, people need support. They need something to hang on to. And I agree with Christina. I think when the First Lady starts this program, it shows that it's okay to seek for help. And it's not only about the survivors, because for the survivors of GBV, CRSV, approaches, of course, should be different. And they have to, to have the services from people who are actually trained how to work with someone who have experienced this kind of violence. But in general, I think this is also a very important step for us as a society to heal. And this is just the first step. We will have many others to come in the future.
Thank you for the responses from the both of you. And I think this is where we need to leave this discussion off as we have reached our time limit. So I would like to thank you, Halina, Christina, and also Lara, who unfortunately needed to drop off sharp on time, for all your contributions and all your work. We have been really honored and proud that we could support this work that you have been doing as part of your fellowship also, Halina. And as GMF, we will continue to engage with supporting Ukraine in the ways we can. I would like to draw the attention of our audience to our Reading C Fellowship program and a few upcoming conversations we will have in the course of the next month around the topic of recovery in Ukraine leading up to the Ukraine Recovery Conference. We will deal with the role of Central European countries in the recovery, as well as the cooperation between civil society and local administration in the recovery process. I also want to draw the attention, especially of our Ukrainian audience members, to our U3R, Ukraine Relief, Resilience and Recovery Program that we are running under the Transatlantic Trust of the German Marshall Fund. We will have a new call coming up for civil society actors operating in Ukraine in the coming days, so please keep an eye on that. And with that, I encourage you to follow our work, and once again would like to thank our panelists for this excellent overview on a very important topic. Thank you very much for being with us today.